Hey, what's up guys? Today I'll show you a horror thriller film, OUJIA, Origin of Evil. Spoiler ahead, watch out and take care. The movie begins with a widow fooling a male client and his daughter with a seance scam. Lena and Doris, the widow's daughters, assist their mother in conducting a believable act by dressing up as a spirit and blowing out candles. After the show, Doris, the youngest daughter, asks why the client's daughter described their work as a scam. The widow mother explains scamming is lying, and what they do is help a bereaved family experience closure from their deceased loved ones. That night, Lena, the eldest daughter of the widow, sneaks out of her room and goes to her friend's house. She meets two of her best friends and the senior student they invited. One of Lena's best friends asks everyone to try the newly bought Ouija board. In a bedroom, they form a circle and place the board in the middle. They press the planchette on the board with their fingers, and they start asking if there's a spirit in the room. One of Lena's friends is terrified, but Lena explains it's nothing and just a game. Then suddenly, the senior student asks Lena to be his date at the prom. Lena uses the board to accept the invitation. They continue asking for a spirit until the mother of Lena's friend catches them playing late at night. Lena comes out from her friend's house, and outside, the widow waits for her. In the car, the widow notes her daughter's choice of game. Lena then recommends using the Ouija board in the act. The following day, the senior student visits Lena at her house to attend school together. The widow is surprised to see a boy meeting her daughter. The widow then asks Lena to bring Doris with them. While Lena and Doris prepare their bags, the widow talks to the senior student and threatens him not to touch her daughter's hormone without permission. While the daughters are at school, the widow goes to a shop to buy candles. Then she spots an Ouija board game on display and buys one. The widow then fetches Doris at school. From the car, she witnesses two boys bullying Doris with insults. The widow quickly goes out, but luckily, the principal arrives to call out the two boys. Behind the principal is the widow standing, waiting for Doris. She tells Doris to go to the car, while the widow checks on Doris's school situation with the principal. At home, the widow sets up the new Ouija board on the table and attaches a magnet to the planchette, so she can move it during the act. She then practices her script, calling for a spirit. While the widow practices, Doris blankly stares at the wall upstairs in her room with Lena on the couch. Every time the widow asks during her training, Doris answers every one of them. When the widow finishes her practice, Doris returns to her usual self, which weirds out Lena. That night, Doris descends from her room and goes to the Ouija board in the dining room. She calls her father's spirit, and her father's response thrills her. She then looks through the planchette and sees something. As for Lena, who's sleeping with a blanket, she wakes up because someone pulls her blanket away to the ground. She thinks it's Doris who did it and tries to pull a prank on her, but no one's found in the room. The following morning, the principal summons the widow at his office to talk about Doris' advanced cursive writing. On their way home, the widow asks who taught Doris to write that way, and Doris plainly says a new friend. When they reach home, the widow receives a notice taped on the front door. The statement contains the bank intending to evict them from their house if they still couldn't pay their debt. That night, the widow worries if they should move out or keep staying at the house. The widow reminisces the memories of her late husband in the house with Lena. Then, Doris brings out an envelope filled with more money than they need to pay for their home. They ask where Doris got the cash, and Doris replies that her father tells her there's some money in the basement behind the wall. The widow and Lena follow Doris in the basement, and they watch Doris search for more behind the hole in the wall. Doris says it's the only cash behind. Doris explains the money comes from the people who lived in the house, and that her father pointed to the location. Then the three go to the dining room. The widow wants to know if her late husband is in the house, so they use the Ouija board to summon her late husband. They all gather at the table and play the Ouija board. Doris starts the conversation with the spirit and gives thanks to her father for the money. But she goes quiet and says, it's hard to hear him sometimes, like a car radio when we go in a tunnel. The widow asks if she can hear him, and Doris says, whispers. Doris explains she can listen to the voices better when near the board, especially when touching the planchette. Lena wants to stop her sister, but Doris continues to call her father's name. The planchette moves to the yes answer. Lena, in shock, stands away from the table and cries to stop whatever they're doing. However, the widow still asks a specific question about where he was when she announced her pregnancy to Lena. The planchette moves around the letters to form the word shower. The widow jumps out of her seat, completely surprised. Lena asks if the answer is correct, and the widow nods. Doris then tells everyone that her father doesn't need her to move the planchette. The planchette moves alone towards the yes answer, and everyone besides Doris retreats a step farther from the table. Doris takes the planchette and looks through the planchette's glass again. The widow asks why Doris looks through the glass, and Doris says she can sometimes see them. Then she explains she hasn't seen her father yet, but she wants to see him again. Later that night, while Doris is sleeping, the widow and Lena talk in the dining room. Lena is reluctant and thinks that whatever is happening is not accurate, but the widow sees it as an opportunity to boost sales. The widow then grabs the money from the envelope and says she'll pay it to the bank tomorrow morning. Lena is left alone in the dining room, and she tries to look at the planchette's glass. While looking, she sees a shadowy body behind the wall peeking, but suddenly disappears. She jumps from her chair, dazed by what she saw. The following day, at school, Lena and the senior student talk to each other about the upcoming prom. He's about to kiss her, but the school principal appears to stop them. The principal brings Lena to his office to talk about Doris' absenteeism. Lena says the situation is complicated as to why Doris not at school. At home, the widow incorporates Doris in the act to make the client believe everything, primarily when Doris uses a man's voice to speak the last word. After the session, the client shows thanks to the widow and promises to return the next day. But Doris, on the other hand, is starting to feel pain on her nape. That night, Doris is unable to sleep due to the pain. She wakes up her sister for medicine, but it doesn't work. So Doris goes to the Ouija board and tells her father that it's so painful. Then she tries to look through the glass and sees a shadowy figure on her side, but it disappears instantly. Her nape hurts again, and she is about to go upstairs when she suddenly stops in front of the mirror. Horror in her eyes fills her, opening her mouth wide enough, allowing a shadow spirit to possess her entire body. Doris goes to her sister's room and whispers a mumbling to her sleeping sister. But Lena wakes up and goes to the bathroom. Suddenly, while looking in the mirror, her mouth feels as if someone's stitching them, and she screams loud enough until she wakes up to realize it's only a nightmare. The following day at school, Doris stands emotionlessly on the playground. The two boys are constantly bullying her, want to throw a stone at her using a slingshot. But suddenly, Doris stares at the boy who holds the slingshot, and somehow, Doris controls the boy to face the stone to himself. The boy stretches the elastic band and shoots himself in the face. That night, the widow goes to a restaurant to meet the principal. They want to talk about their daughters. While at home, Dorothy's face is scarier because her eyes are white while watching television. At the restaurant, the principal tells the widow that the spirit world is a dangerous place. But the widow defends that whatever she's doing is good. Then she proposes to allow the principal to try it at her home to talk to his late wife. But she apologizes and realizes it's insensitive. Everyone is at home, and Lena goes back to her room after changing clothes. She notices her doll given by her father has its mouth stitched. Furious, Lena rushes to Doris' room and instantly blames her for destroying her doll. But Doris says it's their father who did it to stop the voices. Lena doesn't believe her, and the widow comes into the room to know what has happened. The widow asks again if Doris did it, but Doris says no and tells everyone that her sister lies. Then Lena says something is wrong with Doris, and she tells her mother she's either too stupid or too stubborn to see it. Lena walks out of the room. Following her is the widow. They shout against each other about Dorothy's situation, and Lena keeps pointing out the problem, but the mother is too blind to see it. The following day, Lena finds papers written in fluent Polish from Doris' room. She brings it to the principal's office and tells him to have someone translate it at school. Lena tells the principal that she witnesses Doris writing the Polish herself on the paper, and before she leaves, she says, hoping that it's nothing serious. In the late afternoon, the principal visits the widow's house. Then he says he wants to try out the seance to talk to his late wife. The three of them, besides Lena, sit around the Ouija board for a session. The principal asks if his wife is there. The planchette moves to yes. Doris exclaims that his wife's spirit is hard to hear and stares at him with a small smile on her face. Then he asks if she misses him. The planchette moves to yes. Then last, he asks his wife's middle name, and the planchette spells Lynn. But suddenly, the planchette moves to letters to form the word forgive. The principal says what for, and Doris says it's about a fight. When the principal asks what the argument is about, Doris frowns and says it's of no importance. Then Doris says his wife wants him to be happy. But Doris' voice changes into an older woman on her last word, happy. The session ends, and the principal requests a private room to talk with the widow about Lena's misconduct at school. Doris says she wants to join, but the talk is only for the adults. Then Doris asks if she can watch television instead. In Lena's room, the principal quickly explains what's happened in the session. The principal says that whatever Doris does is real. The medium is Doris, and sometimes she experiences confusion due to different voices whispering to her. During the session, he says he tricked Doris into saying the words by thinking about them repeatedly in his head. Doris listens to whatever someone is thinking about now. She channels different powers and forces, but not his wife nor Doris' father. Downstairs, once again, Doris' eyes are white and her mouth wide open while the television plays. Then the senior student arrives at the place to see her sister, but Doris says they're busy. So instead, Doris leads the senior student in the basement while waiting for them to finish. She asks the senior student to grab the bag behind the hole in the wall and finds inside ID of unknown names. Then suddenly, Doris attacks the senior student and whispers in his ears inaudible words. Upstairs, the principal explains the translation of Doris' writing. It's about Marcus, a Polish immigrant imprisoned by a sadistic doctor who experienced awful experiments and other captives inside the house's basement. Mainly, the spirits who died in the basement still lingers and know everything that happened in the house, especially when the widow's family first moved in, which is why Doris knew the answer about her mother's pregnancy announcement to her late husband. After their talk, they realize how dangerous Doris has become. They descend downstairs, and suddenly a hanging body of the senior student appears on the stairs. The sight of the corpse makes Lena cry. The three of them decide to go to the basement and burn the Ouija board. After they burn it, the principal looks at the hole in the wall. He finds the skulls of the experimented captives. Then Lena says, "We played in a graveyard," which is one of the restrictions before playing Ouija board. Near the furnace where they're burning the board, a vent on the wall echoes Doris' voice asking for help. The principal volunteers to go inside, discovering an abandoned operation room of the sadistic doctor. In the dark, Doris is not herself anymore and attacks the principal, who's reciting a prayer. The principal returns to the other side of the vent, but his eyes are white like Doris, and he attacks the widow and daughter. The two escape the basement, and the principal returns to his usual self. He locks the basement door, but he finds Doris hanging upside down in the ceiling. She screams at him, and he falls down the stairs, breaking his neck. Lena tries to open the front door, but it's locked. Then on the table, they see the Ouija board clean. Suddenly, a force knocks down the widow. Lena tries to escape upstairs, but the hanging corpse captures her and throws her at the stairs. Below Lena is Doris looking at her. Then she crawls on the wall and attacks her sister. The widow wakes up and convinces Doris to take her instead. So Doris drags the widow onto a table and locks her in place. Someone carries Lena to her room, and when Lena opens her eyes, she sees her father. But he disappears after she calls for him. Then she finds the doll with stitches on its mouth and remembers it means to stop the voice. Lena has to stitch Doris' mouth so as to stop whatever is happening. Doris is about to cut open the widow in the basement when Lena knocks on Doris with a chair. She grabs a needle with a thread, but Doris screams loud to push out Lena. But Lena strives forward and straddles on her sister. Every time she buries the needle to stitch her mouth, shadow figures pile behind Lena. They hold her body one by one, and when she's almost finished, more shadow spirits swallow her and throw her at the wall. Doris wakes up and finally sees her father. As for the widow, she only sees Doris' dead body with a stitch on her mouth. The widow sets herself free from the shackles and approaches Doris. Lena from afar walks near and says, "I have to do it to stop the voices." When she faces the widow, her eyes are white, and she thrusts a knife at her mother. Then she returns to her usual self and cries at her dying mother, who apologizes for everything. The movie ends with a psychiatrist calling Lena's name on repeat. Lena became mental after the incident. The psychiatrist asks her about her sister's corpse location and murdering her mother. But she diverts everything and tells the story again from the beginning. Lena imitates an Ouija board on the ground with her blood and summons her sister Doris when she's left alone in the room. In the end, she successfully calls her demon, and Doris attacks Lena's psychiatrist. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.